Beautiful. So, welcome everybody. This is our BEEP event for work-life school balance, which is crucial, especially in the wake of COVID. I wanted to introduce Dr. Shandas, Robin Shandas, the professor and chair of the bioengineering department here at CU Anschutz. He has created numerous new ventures that resulted in companies and have since sold a few of them and is now working on a couple of other things as well. So he's pretty versed in how to juggle his personal life and his work life and his school life as a professor and chair and founder of the bioengineering department. So with that, I'd like to hand it over.
Okay. I feel like this topic is something I've been thinking about for a long time. It's sort of not just that I've been thinking about it, it's something that's sort of been forced upon me. I'm a pretty ambitious person and I want to do, so as a result of that, I take on things that in retrospect, I'm like, oh, should I really have taken this on? I mean, and bioengineering is a good example of that. It's not like I have any regrets about taking on the formation of a brand new department when I actually didn't know how to form a department at a university and had to learn all of that. But um, but I always think about that. It's like, well, if I had known how much work it was going to take to actually form the department, hire all the people, to put all the curriculum together and stuff like that, would I have actually done it? And could I have done it and still kind of maintained, my sanity and my marriage and my and still kind of my kids were kind of growing at the time and still kind of pay attention to that. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure I have any kind of like right answers for that. It's just something I think about a lot, and I think about it now when I form new ventures as well. So EneroTrack is a new company, sort of new, that I'm the CEO of, and I'm trying to get it. I'm raising another round, a Series A round for it, and kind of take it to its next level of operation, which also means hiring more people, expanding the team, a lot more growth, and so forth. And so that's also challenging. And then yeah, I mean, I've been married now for 22 years now, and I have kids that are teenagers, and so this has sort of been part of the process of this. So again, I'm not sure I know, I'm going to be satisfactory in terms of saying this is exactly what you should do for work-life balance, but I can certainly kind of provide, like I said, riff and kind of react on some of the things Lauren put together in her presentation. So work-life balance definitions, myths, business impact of stress, evaluating stress level, improving work-life balance. So Lauren, I mean, you said that you don't want to do the poll, but actually I went through the poll and I was curious what I would score on this. So I'll tell you what I scored, and if anybody wants to kind of tell me what they, so number one, I'm like at 5. um, then after that it gets a little better. So here, for instance, I'm at 2, I think, for number 2. At 3, I feel again I'm at 2. 4, I'm also, I think, at 2. 5, I'm also at 2. At 6, I think I'm at 2. So really, I mean, I spent a lot of time at work, but I feel like, and maybe it's just a function of my having gone through a lot of this, I do pay a lot of attention to try on those other aspects, the sleep, exercise, nutrition, kind of emotional control and regulation. This idea of control. I mean, what is it that I have control over, and really kind of thinking about that a lot. Well, how can I balance, still incorporate what I do at home with my work, and certainly for myself, this idea, I think about this a lot. What is it that, kind of helps me and helps reset my energy level? I don't know if anybody else wants to talk about what they scored here. Um, so work-life balance, prioritizing work and life. again, I'm not sure. I think of it more as prioritizing, or I think of it more as like there are certain times in my life when I feel like my focus is like overwhelmingly in one area or another. That doesn't mean that just because I'm focusing on work that I'm necessarily ignoring the kind of other aspects of my life, but at a certain for a certain period of life, for a certain period of time, a few days, a few weeks, whatever it is, that one aspect of this may be a dominant focus, but then I have to make sure that doesn't like continue for for a long period of time. So uh, these other things, I mean, health, pleasure, leisure, family, spiritual development, these, obviously all very important things, but I think it's important to think about what exactly it means to each of us, because it is different, and what we get out of it, and this idea that in work you can say I'm very goal, you can be very goal oriented. I need to accomplish these things, and so forth, but I'm not necessarily convinced that a goal oriented approach is how you approach the other parts of your life, right? I mean, it's hard to say, well, my goal is to achieve maximum leisure. I mean, I don't know what that means, and so that there's kind of I think sometimes it gets misconstrued, that the other side, that the balance side of it, the life side of it, that it has to be a goal oriented thing that that fulfills the equation of whatever I put in my work. It has to equal what I put in the life side of it. Again, this is just my kind of reactions to this. And I think that's what you're pointing out here, Lauren, that it is sort of a myth, this idea that, you have to balance 50%, or you have to equate the two. Um, I fully agree, and have noticed that, there are kind of yeah, either women want more work-life balance than men, or in my experience, they are more open about talking about it, and bringing it up in professional conversations. I don't know if that means that men don't want it, but perhaps there's more socialization that kind of makes it harder for them to talk about, which I think can be problematic. Um, and it is something that I'm curious about as I see kind of my kids, who's my son is now first year in college, my daughter is a junior in high school, and I kind of look at them kind of move into the professional area, work area from home. It's sort of it's interesting and tough to see them move through that process, and and it's not like, when they're 2 years old and it's pretty easy to kind of, essentially kind of give them what they want. This is a lot harder to do. And I noticed some of this stuff. It's like the socialization, the difference between men and women, how my son kind of talks to me about the things he does or really doesn't talk to me. And then my daughter is much more open about talking to me and my wife about these kinds of things. Again, very, very kind of interesting dynamics. Um, Um, yeah, I mean, the idea of stress as a perturbation, I think, is important to look at. I mean, I think it can be a very positive thing, but it can also obviously be a very negative thing. So yeah, some thrive under stress. I don't know if I necessarily agree that others wilt. I think that, as an engineer, I think about kind of system dynamics. If I'm kind of using a systems engineering kind of analogy, if I perturb a system, that the response to that perturbation might be immediate, or it may take some time, right? There may be a fairly large lag in terms of the response, and that's how like my experience with different people that are faced with stress. Some people are like, yeah, I gotta like deal with this right away. I'm used to it. I can react in a very healthy way. Others are like, well, I'll kind of absorb it. I'll think about it. I'll kind of incorporate it. I don't know, and then a reaction will happen later. And so I don't think it's necessary that others wilt. I think it's more, it may take more time for that reaction to manifest. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think in the kind of fast-paced and expectations of high growth, all these kinds of things that I think are kind of the norm and expectations of professional work. I think the interpretation, if somebody doesn't immediately react to stress in a kind of in a way that connotates like professional success, I think that can be bad, because it's like, okay, if you as an employee, if you are under a deadline and you deliver, that's seen as a really positive thing. But if you have issues, then it's seen as negative. But again, I'm not sure that that's the way to look at it. I mean, you may be under a deadline and you may miss the deadline, but that doesn't mean that ultimately you may not be a really successful professional. I mean, it could mean that you just take a little more time to actually have to incorporate some of this, and then as you keep moving in your life, in your profession, you'll kind of figure it out, type of thing. So this idea of stress, again, as a perturbation in your life, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think where things can go a little sideways is this expectation of how you respond, and how long it takes to respond, right? I mean, we're all kind of, again, socialized, I believe, to have this immediate response. Somebody gives you a project to take on, you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'll get it done immediately, blah blah blah. And I don't know, again, I would just kind of question that mode of and those expectations, because it doesn't mean that somebody else can't do a great job, and it may take longer the first time, but again, it'll get better. In fact, it might be even better because they've learned from the process as well. So again, that's kind of my reaction to this idea of stress as a perturbation. And certainly there's physiologic response to stress. I mean, it's conditional. It's a conditioned response, and the bad thing about it being conditioned response is sometimes you don't have control over it, right? I mean, it's like, and you do have a physiologic kind of fight or flight response. The good thing about it is I think you can actually train yourself, to go beyond that kind of acute response, and you could actually have that manifest physiologically through a lot of different practices, and so I think that's something that is really important, I think, for emotional regulation, emotional control, in kind of that balance as well. So how do you know if you're out of balance? Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think this idea of kind of understanding yourself and calibrating kind of how you feel about something, how your body kind of reacts to certain things, and your kind of personal, professional kind of life. I think kind of reflecting and thinking about it in an observational but not judgmental way, I think is really important. And I think it is important to remove the judgment from it. I mean, I think it's important to observe kind of what's happening, but I think it's absolutely imperative to remove the judgment from it, and just kind of be curious about what is happening with you in these kinds of situations, and just kind of reflect on it. Yeah. How do you know you're achieving healthy work-life balance? I mean, again, I don't know if it's like a metric that you're like, okay, here you go, you are doing this or not. Again, I don't think about it that way. I feel like, I can observe myself, observe my relationships, observe my performance. I can observe, again, with a non-judgmental way about that. And in a weird way, if I feel like I don't have the time to observe myself, I see that as a sign that okay, I need to kind of think about what I'm doing. So at least that's how I look at it. I mean, there are certain times when I'm really stressed and I'm like, I got to get this done, or and it's not that that's an unhealthy thing necessarily. It's certainly unhealthy if it keeps going, if it becomes a chronic type of thing. But you know, if it's like an acute thing that I'm done, and then I can actually go back to observing and moving forward, then I think I feel like that balance is a little more there. Um, Yeah, I mean, stress comes in different forms, absolutely. Work, deadlines, relationships, politics, ongoing changes. Um, yeah, I mean, and again, I think this is very conditional. I think, all of these things don't change. I think the weighting of how some of these things may impact you. In fact, some of them may impact you more than others. I think it's more important to recognize that aspect of it. Is there one thing or a couple of things that are weighted in a greater way than others, and trying to recognize that, I think, is absolutely important. The only other thing I'd say to this is this idea of kind of judgment about your life versus other people's lives. Um, I think that's a huge source of potential stress. It's like, how am I doing versus, my neighbor or my colleague or my peer? Um, and maybe it falls under relationships with others. But I do notice that. I mean, and again, a student or somebody, a professional, might be actually doing fine. Again, according to all objective metrics, they may be doing really well, but they may be really stressed because they may feel internally that what they're doing compared to how their peer is doing, or the perception of how their peer is doing, um, is is manifest in such a way that it causes a lot of stress. And that's kind of an uncontrolled type of stress, stress, because what are you really going to do about it? I mean, I guess you can try to sabotage your peer. You can try to make them kind of, you know, work less or be less successful. But that's, again, that has all sorts of other problems. Um, and so I think that aspect. I mean, again, as I kind of think through this, my experience is that component is a huge source, and I'd be curious about your feedback about that aspect of it. It's like, how do I see myself versus how I see, and again, I want to stress that it's a perception. How do I see my peers, my colleagues, and what they're doing? I think that's a component I see pretty frequently. Obviously, we see it with students all the time in terms of grades and stuff like that, but I see it in the professional world as well. Um, and then management of this. I mean, I think, Lauren, all the stuff you put in here is really important. But it's also, I think it's important to figure out what works for you. And so for me, it's always a combination of different things. I mean, uh, I've always kind of done a lot of like athletic things in my life, and so exercise is really important for me. I mean, like yesterday, I mean, Lauren knows some of this, but I mean, I had a tough day yesterday. I mean, I was giving two lectures. I was running the department meeting. I had a bunch of other things, and I was going from like 6 o'clock in the morning to like 7 o'clock at night, nonstop, essentially on Zoom, where I had to I had to give all this energy to my computer screen. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? um, but it's really exhausting, and I had to go downstairs to my basement and run on my treadmill for 2 hours before I felt like, and I was telling my wife, just don't talk to me here. I need to go like do my exercise. And once I did the exercise, then I felt a lot better. I felt like I was more chemically balanced, perhaps, or something. But I needed to do that. And yeah, and certain things. I was going to talk to my daughter about her some of her homework, and I couldn't do it. And we had to I had to talk to her about delaying it for the weekend. But again, those are things that I have to recognize that I have to do. Um, and and it's just, to me, it's this idea of control my life, and what are the things that I need to do in order to take control of my life. There are some things I have to do. Like yesterday, I had to do those things, right? I mean, I had to do them. But after the fact, I had to also do something to, kind of reinforce to me that I have control over my life. So whatever it is, I think it's important to understand, to incorporate, to be pretty kind of diverse about these different things, and then make sure you feel disciplined about doing that. And again, I'll use that yesterday as an example. At the end of the day, I'm like, okay, should I? There was a little part of me that's like, I don't know if I really want to get on a treadmill and exercise. Maybe I'll go have a glass of wine instead. But I had to make myself go and exercise. And it becomes easier as you go through this, and that actually was much better for me than having a glass of wine, right? So again, it's like yeah, and that's specific to me, but I think it is important to understand what works better at certain times than others. Yeah, I mean, managing your time. I mean, it's very easy to say manage your time. I mean, it's a triviality. Manage your time. I mean, how hard can it be? Um, but it's very, very complicated as well, right? Because it's not just you. It's your relationships, your professional obligations, your personal obligations, all of these things, and each of those things has in turn other things that impact your kind of state of mind and so forth. So I think it's hard. You know I think about it less as managing my time and more as, do I have control over my time? Are the things that I'm doing with my time things that I'm choosing to do? And that helps me a lot, because then I'm like, okay, if I absolutely don't have to do this, don't feel like doing this, then I'm just going to say, yeah, that's something that I'm not going to do. Unplugging when you leave work, again, this is really hard to do. Again, everybody says it. It's like a cliche, right? Unplug when you leave work. Especially with COVID, it's I feel like it's almost impossible to do, because it's so easy to get on and do some work. It's so easy to use your cell phone to work, and so forth. So I think, again, it has to be kind of a boutique kind of thing. What is it? What does that mean for you? Um, I mean, in some ways, having my cell phone has helped me a lot, because I can, in fact, go somewhere, be up in the mountains. I mean, do something else that helps me. But if I get an email or something that I need to respond to, I can do it and then forget about it, right? So it's sort of a weird balance there. But you can't like, do too much of that either. Um, Taking all the vacation time, yeah, absolutely. I think you don't want to kind of deprive yourself of this, and you don't want to kind of subscribe to the mythology that working like crazy is the way to get ahead. I don't believe that at all. I think working in a smart way is the way to get ahead. Talk to others about stress levels and lean on your support system. Again, very, very important. There's a lot of kind of socialization and conditioning that kind of impacts how comfortable you feel with this. Um, and it's important to recognize that, because sometimes it is hard for certain people to talk, because and maybe, from a generalization perspective, maybe that is more difficult for men to do that than women, because sometimes I feel like men are socialized. When you talk about stuff like that, it's seen as a kind of more of a weakness, and and I think that can be hard. And this part of the reason, as the department chair and so forth, it is something I try to talk about myself, even though again I'm kind of socialized not to talk about it, but I have to kind of make myself talk about it so that I'm trying to demonstrate to others it is okay to talk about. Um, and then yeah, better care of yourself. Again, where we just entered a new year. It's like I got to make a New Year's resolution to get better, get more fit, eat better, blah blah blah. But this is an ongoing thing. Um, I feel like I always think about the catalytic energy to do something new, right? I mean, if it's really hard to do, I'm gonna do it. I might try it out, and then I'm not gonna. So, are there things that you can do to make it, easy? So, if it's physical activity, maybe it's like you take like, I don't know, 100 extra steps a day. I mean, I don't. I'm just again something that's really easy to do. It's almost a no-brainer, and then that's a start, and then you take a next start, and that's a little bit easier. And again, for me, I found that that's very helpful. And in fact, I really like that, because that way I can learn to do new things, but not take on a huge amount of additional work.
Those are great. So much. I have some questions that I wrote down as you were talking, unless somebody else has questions or feedback or wants to talk about their stress management, work-life balance techniques.
I just wanted to say I really liked Dr. Shandas how you brought up, focusing on how something makes you feel. So you could either feel stressed and exercise, or you could feel stressed and have a glass of wine. But focus on what's actually, how you actually feel from doing each of those things. So, and after you've had the glass of wine, like how you feel. After you've done the exercise, how you feel, because it can be easy to not really see the value in what you're doing to manage your stress and not feel connected to it. So, if you don't feel like connected to your exercise, you might not feel motivated to handle your stress that way. But if you like really believe in what you're doing, if you remember how good it made you feel the last time and things like that, you'll probably be more inclined to do that. So I just liked how you focused on like listening to how you feel, rather than just listening to like maybe what other people do or things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. Please go ahead.
to respond to that too, Kat. I really enjoyed how you brought in others' perspective. So like I perceive some people as doing more work than me, so then I feel like I have to live up to this expectation that's unrealistic for my life. Um, I mean, that's really important, I think, to resonate with as well, because you should never compare yourself to somebody else. You should definitely find your personal success in what you're doing and not in your perception of others.
See, and I agree with that, but I also slightly disagree. Like, I think comparing yourself, if it's going to make you feel bad, totally is wrong. But, even for example, Lauren, when I met you, I absolutely compared myself to like your experience and things like that. And I'm like, she's way ahead of me. And realistically, she's like someone who I might be competing for a job with one day. Or starting our own business together, either way. But you know what I mean? So it didn't make me feel like I was a failure and this and the other, but it did make me write a list of things that I wanted to work on. So I think, a little bit of competition, a little bit of comparison can be a good thing as long as it's not rooted in like insecurity and, as long as it's not making you feel worse about yourself, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really important point. And there are some nuances there also that I feel I should point out. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I'm an immigrant. I came to this country, when I was 14, and we didn't have a lot of money when we came here, and so but I'm thankful to my parents, because they raised me with, like, I call it abundant love, right? I mean, it was like, I felt like whatever I did, I was always loved. And when I think about that, I mean, where that helped me was this idea of like comparing myself to others, It's really important because it's like I could take a healthy attitude to competition. That's because I could say, oh, this person is like doing these amazing things, and so I'm like, I want to know how they got there. Like, what are the steps that I want to learn from them, right? And that's a healthy attitude. But there is the other side of it that has to be acknowledged, which is that if you don't have that, then it becomes like this tremendous amount of emotional work that you need to overcome and you need to do in order to face up to the world, the competitive world that you live in. And that's and this is, and I think for for an organization like Beep, it is absolutely imperative that you recognize this, because if there are people that where the level of emotional work that they do is huge but discounted in general society, it's going to that has an impact, and you have to recognize that it has an impact. And it's something that even for me, I kind of came to recognize later in my life, as a really important thing to figure out, because I'm a pretty competitive person, and I feel like, well, I'll compete against anybody, and I've and but I also recognize that I can't, like, kind of force or expect that attitude in everybody that works for me, right? Or everybody that I work with. Because again, everybody comes to this with different kind of personal histories, different kind of places, and it's very, very hard. It's a nuanced thing that it's very hard, and I'm just starting to recognize kind of this idea that emotional work is as hard to do as other work. But you don't get paid for it.
Yeah.
This is the hard part, right? And but it has to be valued. This is and so the way, so please think about how you would value that. It's hard. I mean, and I'd love suggestions for that, because it's like I run a department. It's sort of like, I understand that people, there are like varying levels of emotional work that people do to get, in a sense, from an objective place to the same place professionally. So you could say, well, they're in the same place professionally, so I'm going to like recognize them equally. But the level of emotional work that one person has done to get there is so much higher than somebody else, right? And how do you recognize that?
Well, I mean, I think as one of the program coordinators for BEEP, I've tried to do that with all of you all. I've really tried to get to know you guys on a more personal level. I know some people I haven't gotten a chance to actually like sit down and have a conversation with yet, but like especially the grad students that I'm in class with, I've gotten to know them on a kind of more school basis, and then I've gotten to know you guys now working together. And then, one way that I try and mitigate the stress that I have is kind of throw in like, oh, well, how are you doing today? What, like, are you doing anything fun this weekend? Like, I'm curious to know what you guys are doing, and I want to get to know you all. So I think having that like personal dialogue is important in helping me figure out kind of other people's work ethics and their drive and like things that they need to do to unwind, and me trying to give them space to do that and also say, hey, we need to get this done. But it is a very hard balance, from my perspective. And I'm still, young professional master's student, but it's been pretty interesting to kind of maneuver through some of those interactions.
So, Dr. Shandas, were you asking, just to like clarify the question that you were asking, were you asking how to value the emotional work that you put in yourself, or or valuing other people's emotional work?
Yeah, I mean, and both, and it wasn't, I mean, it was like a question just to ponder. I mean, I wasn't saying you should, we need to get that question answered, but I think it is an important question to kind of think about because, you can say, well, how I value myself is just based on these objective criteria, right? I mean, it's like how much money I make, what position do I have, blah blah blah. I can kind of, and so you can discount within yourself that you've actually worked really hard to get there, right? And I'm not just talking about the professional work that you do, right? I mean, there's a, and so and similarly when we interact with each other and we interact in terms of professional, in the profession where we evaluate each other, where we think about each other, we judge each other, in that aspect as well. It's sort of how do you incorporate that aspect, because again, the simplest thing is to say, well, he or she is like the vice president of this company, so they must be successful. They must have worked hard to get there. Yeah, they must have worked hard. I mean, but again, I'll say, and I mean, that a person of who has certain advantages in their life, I'm not discounting that they didn't work hard to get there, but a person who has a lot fewer advantages in their lives has also had to work professionally hard to get there, but it has to work really hard in other ways to get there as well, right? And so it's something that I've been thinking about a lot because it's one of those hidden things that people don't talk about. I mean, they're not going to talk about because it's very, very personal, and I think we should talk about it more, because it is, and amazingly enough, it's like everybody has to do emotional work. There's like no question, and so and so yeah, we might as well start talking about it. I mean, so this is just stuff that I've been thinking about.